Welcome to the Psych and Business Podcast. We're here to show you how practical psychology can be useful and make your workplace better. I'm Dr. Ernest Wayde. Okay, I have a real treat for you today. We're going to be talking about data, which, if you know me at all, you know is one of my favorite things. But we're going to be focusing on how you can actually use data to drive talent management. And we are very, very fortunate to have an expert in this area. Our guest today has actually been doing this in the Army. Her name is Colonel Kris Saling. Colonel Saling is a prominent leader in people analytics, talent management, and customer experience, with over 20 years of service in the United States Army. As the director of the Innovation for the U.S. Army Recruiting Command, she spearheads data-driven initiatives to optimize talent strategies and enhance human resource management. Colonel, thank you for your service and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Kris, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I've been really excited about this because I love data and you do such a great job applying it to talent management. But before we get into that, I always want to start by hearing about you. You've got such an interesting journey. So tell us a little bit about you, how you got into this kind of work and how you ended up where you are.
Oh, it's a hilarious kind of comedy of errors in some ways, how I ended up with, I think, what is one of the coolest jobs in the Army. I started out, it's like, how do you get into HR and talent management and data-driven talent management and innovation? And it's like all the buzzwords in there, but actually end up being really, really cool jobs. And a lot of it was just by accident. I started out as a complexity scientist. So I was studying emergent behaviors and complex systems. I started using that in a lot of my work prior to coming to the Army G1, the Army Chief of Personnel, when I was working at INDOPACOM. As we were doing counterterrorist analysis, counter-threat finance analysis, a lot of building partner capacity and network strengthening, network generation, that kind of thing. Then my branch, for whatever reason, decided I needed to do a stint in the Pentagon. And I was assigned to the G1. I said, I don't know anything about Army HR. I don't know anything about HR in general. What am I going to do here? There's nothing that's classified. There's nothing that's anything I'm used to working on. So I got into it and we started looking at all kinds of different aspects of talent management and how we could use data to better influence human behavior, look at risk behavior and predicting harmful behavior metrics. I did a lot of work with the Deputy Undersecretary of the Army on a couple of resiliency programs when I first got in. And that led me into a program that at the time we called Human Capital Big Data. And it was this massive data enclave that we had, and people were doing some work with, but not a whole lot. So started reaching out to friends who worked in the area, in the subject matter area. I started reaching out to people who were out in industry and academia and just said, how do we start up a program where we can really leverage this to do some good, to make better decisions, to do all these things? And, oh, you mean people analytics? And I go, well, yeah, I guess I do. So we started people analytics, and it's just kind of gone on like that. And just like, okay, well, what else can we do? Let's see who else is doing cool things. Well, let's try those out. And I would just feel really fortunate that I've had the latitude to be able to sit there and say, wow, they're doing that. That's really cool. I bet we could do that too.
Yeah, I love that story. I love the journey, going from something completely different and then bringing the skill set that you had in that area to this skill set. But I want to ask, why? Why did you feel this was important? Why did you feel it was important to engage in people analytics and to do that kind of work? Because as you said, it wasn't being done before, but you came in and you felt like we need to do this. Tell us why.
Well, there are a couple of reasons. One, I grew up in a household of academics to start with. My mom is a professor of psychology. She teaches behavioral neuroscience. And my sister is a professor of communications, does a lot of work with communication marketing and social media. And both of them had, they just have their passions. They have these subjects that they can delve into and they're fascinated with. And I always felt like, oh, man, I'm not really doing anything I'm not passionate about. I'm not that interested in it. And I hadn't gone either of those directions. I was just like, okay, I'm going to study mathematics. I'm going to study complex systems and failure rates of shuttle hole composition and everything else that went into it. And then, I floundered into the people space and realized that, oh yeah, my sister's in communication and marketing. My dad was a marketer. My mom's in psychology. I'm also in the people space. And this it ignited a passion in just learning more about how people interact and how people make complex systems. how we could look at all of their different behaviors and learn how to better shape their environment. Because as we do with complex systems, we try to better shape that environment to optimize the behaviors of the individual agents within that system. You got 90,000 officers and about 380,000 people total in the Army. I had a very complex system to work with to shape and optimize behaviors. So that was part of it. The other part of it was a way to, improve life for people. It was a way to go in and say, hey, how are folks react? Are they satisfied with their jobs? Are we getting our most talented people into the right positions? Well, how can we incentivize them? How can we apply all of those principles of psychology with the data that we understand about people's individual makeup and create better paths for them?
Yeah, I love both of those reasons. I love the connection to, psychology and human behavior because, obviously psychologists and communication, though, because I think that's the next reasonable thing there. Let's dig into the how, because we talked about, impacting human behavior. And when we're talking about talent manager, especially in a complex system, humans themselves are complex beings. And then in the military, which is a complex system, walk us through how you're using data, what data points you're using, and how that is actually helping you to impact the complex people and the systems.
I mean, we started out originally with talent management with the argument that talent management wasn't a leadership problem, it was a data problem. I got into a little bit of an argument with the Chief of Staff of the Army about that because he said, oh, it's a leader problem. Well, the leader needs the right data, so it's a data problem. But we moved away from that. But what I was really trying to get after is we were making huge amounts of decisions about how we were going to grow and develop and recruit and retain people based on really just two data points. What grade were they and what branch had they chosen? And within that, it's like, okay, you got kind of a cluster of minimum standards that they would meet, but you don't know anything else about the rest of that person. What do they like? What are they interested in? What does an assessment show about their ability, their capability to learn to grow in different areas? What else can they do that, we don't necessarily have a particular career field for, but that we also want to encourage and to grow?
So why is that important? Tell us really quick why that information is important.
Well, because we were making assumptions about these different things based on those couple of data points we had. So it's like, instead of making those assumptions, so we kind of look at it where it's a expertise model versus experience. We want the experience to give you the expertise, but we had to assume it. Now, if we know it with empirical data, then we no longer have to make the assumption that somebody got the growth that they needed out of this organization. We can say, okay, they can do it. Let's create, and we could go like that. We can expand and create these trajectories for folks, let them see what they're good at and what opportunities that opens, and let them see where they might want to develop if they're not on the trajectory to reach one of their goals.
Yeah, I love that because I remember you were telling me previously that in there were some assumptions that you were making that you found to be erroneous, right? And so by doing this, you're actually taking out those assumptions and making sure that it's factual.
Exactly. Because we have a number of different positions we require people to fill on their growth trajectories, so call them key and developmental positions. And when we broke them down, we worked with our logistics branch to really break this down and figure out what capabilities or what KSAOs that we wanted people to have at the end of each of these. It's like, well, maybe this isn't the trajectory that we actually want. Maybe we want them to develop these other things. So they really kind of took apart how they did career trajectories and made them a lot more fluid.
Yeah. So how has this, from what you've done and what you've seen, how has this impacted readiness, right? Soldier readiness in the military? Because that's such a great field to be doing this in.
Completely. One of the things that we look at is how fast we change our structure requirements. As we have a whole analysis team that looks at, what kind of capabilities do we need to have in the Army to go up against different type of projected threats. And if we change that almost immediately, it's like we have no guarantee that we can grow these does it take a new branch? Does it take a new type of skill? How do we grow it? If we have the finite level of detail on individuals, we can say, well, we don't have that particular branch or specialty, but we've got something that's about 95% of it. These folks over here really kind of know how to do the thing that we're asking them to. We just need to teach them on a different platform or on a different program. But it lets us look at, making rapid fills from within the organization rather than having to totally grow a whole new thing.
Yeah, I love that that bringing the science to this, right, instead of just the assumptions. But talk to us a little bit about how you were able to get this stood up and moving forward, because this is a generalization, but the military is not always known for being very fluid and adapting so easy. So how were you able to convince your leaders that this was important and to get them to do this and to follow through in it?
It's funny that you bring that up because we kind of joke about Army innovation kind of being like military intelligence, kind of a contradiction in terms. Uh, Everybody's like, wait, you innovate where? What does that actually mean? But a lot of it was just kind of falling. We had good concepts, we had strategies, we kind of knew where we wanted to go, but we really just needed to give them that one little seed to get it started. I had to find some kind of an application of the data that made life easier for them. We did a number of different things. My team created a redaction tool that allowed people to redact personal information from PDFs. Started using that for surveys, for Freedom of Information Act requests, a number of different things. And people started looking at that going, oh, what else can you automate? We had already been playing with some ideas and automating the scoring of evaluations. So we were able to say, it's like, hey, you spend all this time reading evaluations at a board. We spend like 8 weeks with a whole bunch of general officers reading all these evaluations when they really need to free up some time and look at more granular information about a person that says they're ready for some of these like higher level enterprise leadership positions. So it's like, what if I can automate the OER scoring? And I have just this crackerjack text analyst on my team who is just like, oh yeah, I can do that. Dug into it, and he reduced that 8 weeks of general officer time reading these evaluations to about a 5-minute algorithm.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that was immediate for them. They just went, you can do what? Okay, now do this one, now do this one, now do this one. And now it's keeping up with the demand signal.
I love that example because it demonstrated that you showed value first initially to them, and you took away a pain point. Then they're able to realize, oh, this is very valuable, it's helpful. How else can you be helpful? And so then the requests started coming in, and so you showed the return on investment, and then now you've got them bought in and are able to really take it to great places. Kris, tell us a little bit about how the managers and how the leaders have used the things, the content and the data that you've brought in when they're making decisions about their staff.
So it really kind of depends on the leader. Some of them want to go into the data, into the analysis. My previous boss, the commanding general for HRC, loved getting into the data. He worked with us enough that he started teaching himself how to code and taking coding classes. So he very much likes to look in on what the trends are, just kind of, what kind of things are emerging, and really kind of helping figure out how to balance out some of his intuition with, the data we have on skills. It's like leaders always want to know, it's just like, okay, when do I know when to take a chance on somebody who doesn't have the top skills? Well, okay, we can do some practical exercises on that. But a lot of what we do is research on different team dynamics. We are looking at, you want these particular skills, but what else do we need to have? We've really started to emphasize some of the soft skills and hard science combinations that we need. Because especially in the teams I put together, we spend a huge amount of our time talking both to technical audiences and to lay audiences about what it is we do. So communication has to be up there. They have to be able to talk both to that technical and to that lay audience. So I send them to technical conferences and I make them teach our Data 101 data literacy class.
So they're combining both the people skills there and the technical skills.
Yeah. We're seeing more of that across the Army. Because as folks look at what they need, what our Secretary of the Army's second goal, she's got 6 major goals that we're going after, but the second one is become a data-driven Army. And part of that is everybody's kind of looking at their programs, how are they using, are they using data, are they using analytics? That I think is an easy check the block. I try not to aim them at that so much as I kind of try to bring them back to the assumptions that we talked about before. It's like, where can you eliminate the assumptions because you actually have the data and the analytics to support what it is you're trying to get after.
And I think when we're talking about data and analytics, and I love the example of your boss taking the data, I think one of the most important things when it comes to analytics and information is context. right? We need to make sure that we're putting context into whatever information that we're getting. How do you weave that into presentations when you're helping people understand the data?
So I actually learned a lot from a block of instruction that one of my teammates does on data storytelling. And I mean, he breaks it down. We talk about plot diagrams, and we talk about rising action. We talk about resolution, all the different elements that you would do if you were scripting this out. So when we put together data briefs, we'll use a plot diagram and go, okay, what's the exposition? What is the kind of rising action that tells you that this is going to be important? How are we building the story? Okay, here is the problem we're going to solve. What's the resolution? And if we walk people through that, if you can, draw them into the story, and it's not just my research found da 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 on this chart, then you have a much better chance of kind of grabbing hold of that decision maker and having them follow your logic.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point when it comes to data and analytics. It's not just about the information, it's about the story that you're telling, right? And making it make sense to the person that's listening to it, especially as we're talking about talent management, we're talking about people, right? So how does this data help a person be more engaged or get moved towards the career that they want to do or the work that they want to be doing? So really weaving that into something that will mean and make sense to the person that's listening to it.
Yeah, and you've got to build up that context with each step. And a lot of that is understanding the decision that your stakeholder is trying to make. One of the biggest things that we do in the Army side is most of our data scientists who are active duty will come up from regular branches, and then they'll switch over at about the 8 to 10 year mark. We'll send them back to school. They'll go and, polish up their skills. But they come out with kind of that background in how the Army thinks, so that they can come and work with any level of different staff, any commander, any decision maker, and really kind of have the gist of how they need to structure the support for the decision. And as they do that, I mean, it's something that we can teach. I love creating balanced teams and getting cross-pollination. So love bringing in new folks who have no experience with the Army, who have just a whole bunch of really outside of the box ideas, with the folks who have experience how the Army thinks. You put them together and they're able to kind of, jog each other out of their set boxes, their set biases, and figure out really cool stuff.
I love that you brought that up, the cross-pollination work across teams. I know you collaborate with other organizations outside of the military. Talk to us a little bit about how you've seen this being applied, or how this could potentially be applied outside of the military setting in the private sector.
I think a lot of it is just, really kind of chasing after those perspectives. And we talk about it a lot, but we really don't talk about what it means for a problem set. And the way we look at it, and I think the way any business can look at it, is you've got a problem. If you can't see it from 360 degrees, do you really know you've solved all the elements of that problem? So if you bring in people who have that business subject matter expertise, but also some people who are seeing it for the first time and might see it with completely different perspectives, then you really can you can wrap around that entire problem and figure out exactly how you're going to solve it from all those different impact sides.
Yeah. One of the things I always try to advocate for is, if you have a problem, you want to have the people that are being impacted by the problem, as well as the experts who might be engaged in the process that leads to problems, so that you can get that, as you're saying, that 360 perspective. You often get views that you hadn't thought about from your perspective, but are very important when you're trying to come up with the solution. So I love that. Speaking of problem solving, Kris, I know you have a book coming out. So tell us about your book and how that can be really helpful to leaders and organizations as they're trying to emulate the great work that you've done in the Army.
Oh, thanks for that. The book is Data-Driven Talent Management, and it's about using analytics to improve overall employee experience. The whole idea behind this was really kind of taking how we'd framed up a lot of the work going on in the Army to get from, those assumptions to the data, that, in-depth understanding of the fact of the person, moving away from a one-size-fits-all model, which really doesn't fit anybody, to more individual tailored approaches for different types of talent and for different ways of working. But the way I laid it out is I wanted it to be a very practical framework. So there's the scientific basis that we use is in there. The research that I did is in there. But what it's supposed to be is you could pick this up, and I want to develop, these kind of creative, innovative teams, these high performing teams. I want to create a organization that uses assessments, that looks at, different skills, that looks at different attributes, that manages by those, that has flexible work, all these different things we kind of touch on, and give you a practical framework for figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned one of the things I think is really important is teamwork, especially not just in the military, but in the private sector as well. A lot of the work that we all do requires a team, and you want the team to function effectively. So I love this approach of using data and analytics to help you develop that highly functional team. So I think this is such a great book, and I look forward to reading it. Tell us about when the book comes out, how we can get it.
So the book comes out August 27th. Is the US release date. If you are in Canada or the UK, you can get a little bit earlier. It comes out August 3rd. But it's available for pre-order right now. I can share the links with that at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I think it's going to be in Books A Million. It's in a bunch of different places. Or, of course, from my publisher, from Kogan Page. I'm just really excited to have it out, but also at the same time, I'm just like, this is 8 years of work downloaded from my brain into, a bunch of very frantic late night caffeine fugue state typing. I've been through it again and again. And there's sometimes, when you read something that you've written kind of in that mode, and you say, wow, that's really good. Did I write this? Okay.
Yeah.
And there are other
like
things.
You do your best work sometimes in that state. So tell me one of the things, because you've been doing this, you said, for about 8 years, what's one of the best moments that you've had, the best aha moments that you've had in that time?
There've been a bunch of them, just kind of like staggered out. I mean, I'll highlight two of them. One of them was realizing that my very disparate career, or my disparate jobs, actually form a pretty cohesive career if I look at them, again, not just looking at those labels, but looking into the fundamentals. It's like, for my first job, when I was working for Special Operations Command Pacific, I was doing network analysis, and a lot of that network analysis applies also to the relationships between leaders and subordinates. You kind of look over the course of a development of several careers in the Army. It's like, who kind of moves into these areas of influence? Who are the influential leaders who are actually pretty good at selecting talent? Who do they pick? And is it deliberate? Do people kind of get thrown into their orbit? How can I throw more people into the orbit of some of these interesting folks? But then there's kind of all the other stuff that layered on. It's like, because we're working in data, I had to get versed in not just data analytics, but engineering and governance.
Yeah.
As I started getting into innovation, I had to understand acquisition and budgeting. All these little pieces that got tagged on, it just kind of made things more and more effective. So I really started thinking about that, looking at how people do their career trajectories. It's like, people think, only put the stuff on the resume that is relevant to your next career. And it's like, you don't have to throw out the entire first part of your career if you make a career change. There are things that you've done probably all throughout the course of your working age that have contributed to your ability to do new things. So definitely don't want people to throw those out. The other piece, it was just recently, maybe about a year ago, just smacked me on the side of the head when I was looking at how we were doing change management. And it was the concept of change management from a point of empathy. Because, we always come in, I'm doing innovation, I'm modernizing things, I'm doing all this great stuff. They're going to roll out the red carpet for me. Everybody's going to love my ideas. There's going to be a parade in my honor. And then everybody's sitting there just like,
that, yeah.
Will you go away? Just enough of you. I don't want your ideas. We don't want it. Well, you start looking at it from the point of empathy, and I'm just coming in and telling somebody the way they've done everything that they've been doing is wrong. And it's outmoded and it's ancient and they really should do better. You start thinking about it from that aspect, and it's like, wow, I really have to approach this from a very different tack. I have to understand why a person does a particular thing a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm coming in as the designer on HGTV. I'm going to blow all this stuff out. And somebody's like, no, the wall is actually load bearing.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah. This is such a great point that you're making when it comes to change management. A lot of the times, I know I do this, especially when it comes to technology and data. I'm always so excited about it that I just want to tell them about the great thing and how they can make things better. And I don't always appreciate it, just saying from the empathy point of view that they've been doing it this way. They might like it. They're comfortable with it. And now I'm asking them to blow up the way they've done things. And so I really think that's really important when you're introducing something new, especially from data, because a lot of people aren't always comfortable with data. And so I think that's a really important point to keep in mind.
It was like they want their paper, they want their notebook, they want to have it this a particular way because the computer might. This is actually justified. Like the computer might lose it.
Yeah, right. So they want to do double the work, right? The computer does it, but they also want to do it by hand just to make sure, right? Yeah.
Understanding the digital signatures and digital approvals has been an interesting thing to wrangle. Is when we were first fielding one of our new systems, the number one thing we got is like, well, I need to export. No, you're not taking data out of the system. Oh, we don't want to take the data out of the system. We want to be able to export the list to a memo so that we can print it for signature. And I'm just like, why are you printing it for signature? There's an approve button there. Well, the commander needs to sign it. Click.
They're used to doing it that way, right? It's the culture.
Right. There should be something kind of printed out on your desk that has all the formal seals and everything else. And there's great ceremony to. And any time where there's kind of some kind of a ceremony or a ritual to the way somebody does business, you almost got to approach it that way. It's like they need that kind of, whether it's a critical step or a finality to a process. So even if it makes no technological sense, you've got to build in something into the system that gives them that if they're going to adopt it. Otherwise, it's not going to do.
That's interesting. You know what, Kris, we're going to have you come back and talk about change management in the military, because this is what you're talking about is really critical and really interesting. And I want to hear more about how you've managed that in the military.
That's actually what I want to work on is my next book.
Yeah, we should definitely have you come back and talk about it. Like we'll do like a little brainstorming, help you through that.
Oh, love it.
Chris, how do people get a hold of you if they want to follow up with the conversation, or get a hold of you to come speak to them or things like that? What's a good way to reach you?
So I'm really active on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of my business and a lot of my, hey, here's what the Army is actually doing right now. Speaking of change management, so I can push that idea out there. I'm kind of manifesting it. They're gonna do it that way. But I'll share that. And I've also got a website with a contact form, so folks can get a hold of me.
Yeah, we'll make sure we share that in the show notes as well. Yeah, Kris, I always want to make sure that I take advantage of the great guests like you that we have on the show and ask, what's a tip that you can share with leaders, organization, businesses right now?
There's a lot of things that we're talking about today. There's so many different things that we want to do to modernize, to change. And it was actually a mentor of mine. She was a rear admiral who I worked with at Indo-PACOM. And she always used to stop us and tell us, like, yeah, okay, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So, I mean, that's always kind of the reminder as we start these massive programs and these big changes out. It's like, you can't do all of it. You got to get help, or you got to, timeline it out. Yeah. And then the other part of that I've learned recently is that when you do get help, you can't just give away all the grunt work. You got to give away some of the fun stuff too, or else people won't want to come work with you. If you give away all of the admin work and you keep all the fun stuff yourself,
yeah.
And sometimes you got to let some of that go and give it to people who are going to have great ideas and great passion for it. And you want to kind of feed them with that. And you've got to feed people's passion.
Engaged.
Yeah. You've got to give them the good stuff.
I love that. That's such sage advice. Keep them engaged by not just giving away the grunt work. Keep them involved in things that they want to do, some of the fun stuff as well. So I think that's really great advice. I will take that one, especially because I like to do everything. And so it's really important to prioritize. And, I noticed the other day that my daughter is very much like me. She starts a whole bunch of things, but doesn't really finish them because she just wants to keep doing everything. So that's really important advice. You can do everything, but you need to focus on the things that you can do right now. So I love that advice. Kris, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I really definitely want to have you come back.
No, I'd love to. It's awesome.
Awesome. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. Feedback is a gift, and we love gifts. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll join us again next time.